Let us go, then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all. The eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and when I am formulated sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight downed with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl? And should I then presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. And the afternoon, the evening, sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it, after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it toward some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. If one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile, after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean. But as if a magic lantern through the nerves and patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, that is not it at all, that is not what I meant at all. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince. No doubt, an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse. At times, indeed, almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues who have spoken before me have presented you with a number of empirical facts demonstrating that the damage done by persecution continues long after the persecution itself has ceased. I have no such empirical evidence to offer you. I can only offer you the fruit of my experience. Empirical evidence requires that you accept its truth. I can only invite you to accept the fruit of my experience, which began many years ago in one horrible episode of my life in Bergen-Belsen. I say this because I do not think that empirical evidence only is what needs to be had in order for belief to exist. The fruit of someone's experience might be just as valuable, but, I repeat myself, one can only invite others to accept the fruit of one experience, whereas with empirical evidence one can expect others to accept it. A second point I would like to make is that although I shall speak about the moral implications of man-made disasters, I wish to make it clear that I refer only to myself, the moral implications as I see it. No one can dictate to another what moral view he is to take when faced with any situation. It is only within the confines of a person's own conscience that a moral outlook can be formulated. And therefore, I would like you to keep in mind that I refer only to my moral outlook, appealing to you to form your moral outlook. A final preliminary remark. When speaking about the Holocaust with which this meeting is concerned, I find myself in a curious paradox, because what happened was, in my mind, incommunicable to those who did not experience it. I have often quoted, and I will quote again here, the only person who seems to me to have said something worth saying about this peculiarly dark and painful episode in man's history. It was said by a person who himself was an inmate in Auschwitz. These are his words. The experience of the Holocaust in Europe defies language and leads to a mystique of silence or to madness itself. The experience cannot be communicated, not truly communicated. One knows it only from within, where knowledge becomes an obsession. Survivors refrain from speech because they no longer believe in words. I would agree, and therefore you will note that I find myself in a curious position trying to say what cannot be said. As for the moral scope of man-made disasters, they extend from the disaster which befalls a single human being to the disasters which befall hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands. It is almost impossible to deal with a man-made disaster when it is directly faced. I mean by this, when we do not begin to defend ourselves against its horror. I believe that the true man-made disaster, or I shall put it in other words, what is ultimately the man-made disaster is the destruction of trust in one human being. Can I start that again?
What's that?
Can I start that again?
Surely.
Having thought about the man-made disaster in Germany, I have continuously wondered what the essence of such a disaster was. It is not only, it seems to me, the physical destruction of hundreds of thousands of people. It is not only the terrible suffering and torture which these people experienced, but in final analysis, it is the destruction of trust. Following such an episode, it is almost impossible to trust oneself or to trust anyone else. Whoever has lost trust has surely nothing more to lose. In those terrible experiences, such as the one which we are discussing here today, the very fundamental root of life, namely trust, has been severely damaged, if not destroyed. And this destruction is by no means confined to those who were present on the scene. This cancerous growth of decaying trust reaches far into every corner of society, and there commences its diabolic work of rendering man unable to live by virtue of his inability to trust. There is something which we have not recognized, it seems to me, and that is this, that when man has failed his fellow man, he has committed there and then a disaster. Following this line of reason, I am frankly shocked to know that we must, at this stage of the game, be presenting evidence to prove that people who had endured those terrible experiences have been irrevocably damaged. For someone who has been suffocated and stifled by the dry dust of tears and blood, it would be strange to say, "How goes it with you?" I presume that you're all right. And if you are not, you will need to prove it to me. Somewhere along the road, we have lost our way. It seems to me that those of us who have had medical training and medical experience are those people who know the strength of the human fabric, what it can endure and what it cannot endure. And it is up to us to say that anyone whose trust has been broken needs continuous care until that trust has been healed. I cannot believe that it is anything but a lack of courage on our part not to pronounce this truth. If we persist in looking for damaged blood cells and altered states of the bones, we have betrayed the trust which is placed in us. To state that under extreme conditions the human organism cannot continue as if nothing had happened. Admittedly, the painstaking work which is done in many parts of the world to show that damage continues in the tissues of the body is an admirable undertaking. But I would remind you that when we follow this path, we have left the more relevant one of damage not to tissue, but to the capacity to trust one another. That dreadful symphony, which was written in a strange and alien key, we now attempt to transpose into a more familiar key. Horror, such as that experienced by the victims of Nazi persecution, is by no means a daily experience. It goes utterly outside anything which anyone, anywhere, has experienced, and yet we drag it back with all our might and try to attach words to it so that it comes back into our daily lives, clothed now in a more familiar and acceptable a manner. There are some things which must be immediately recognized. Those things do not require elaboration and explanation for their truth to be discerned. When trust is broken, it is immediately apparent as an unjust act. And until we can recognize injustice immediately, I believe that we are going to fail. We have been concerned today particularly with the happenings under the Nazi regime and, to a more limited extent, with some of the happenings in Japan. But let us not think that it is only in Germany or Japan that trust was broken. The bullet that killed Kennedy is ricocheting even today, aiming directly at that fiber without which man cannot be man. I repeat, the fiber, the cord of trust. It is happening in Mississippi and in Alabama. It is undoubtedly happening in our next door neighbor. And if we have the strength to look into the mirror, we will find that it is happening in the person whom we see there. I would urge, therefore, that we gird ourselves so that without needing explanation, we will react immediately to any act of injustice, attempting to repair it and continuing our attempt until the repair has been completed. Thus far, we have been prone to wait, and wait, and wait again, until from a single act of injustice we will have waited until thousands are being committed, and by that time the very numbers paralyze us into immobility. Let me conclude by saying simply that we must be able to react to something else outside of or beyond empirical evidence. We must recognize with our whole being and also respond with our whole being. Until each of us can stand in the darkest night and face the enemy, however strong, however threatening, however menacing, until, I say, we can stand in that dark night and say, I will continue to trust. Until we can do that, there seems to me to be no real hope. However, I believe that many can and do just that. And therefore, I do continue, and I believe that there is reason to continue to hope.
I was born in Clarksville in the state of Mississippi. My name is R.T. Smith. I was born in Clarksville, Mississippi, August the 29th, 1946. My life began with on a Sunday morning. I was raised up by my mother and grandmother. My father died right off of my birth. At the age of 6 years old, I had a chance to go to a public school or a private school. My mother raised me into the Immaculate Conception School. Later on in the year, I was promoted to different grades. And in 1960, I joined with the movement in Clarksdale in the NAACP. Then in 1962, the movement began demonstrating. The first demonstration I ever been in was at the picket at the courthouse. We was arrested and we were released on bond. In 1963, I was arrested for parade without a permit. Then we were sentenced to 30 days in jail. Then Ben Collin, the chief of police, put the Negro boys to work. We worked on the city garbage truck, unloading garbage out of cans. We worked for approximately 17 days. We was released on bond. We had 5 or 6 trials, but we was convicted. Then on July the 2nd, we left Clarksdale, Mississippi, going into the county for the Freedom Democrat Party, telling people about the Freedom Democrat Party. We was in Marks, Mississippi, where there was Lou Sensor, Darius Newman, Harry T. Smith, Bolton Mitchell, Jill Williams, Yvonne McClellan, and Christopher McAfee was in the car. And we was stranded in this town. And after that, Dave Bradshaw was stopped by the sheriff of Marks. He was cursed out, threatened to be killed. The officer, if he come back into town, he would have the white guys in town to beat him. Right after that, Lou's sister got picked up, was threatened, and was taken to jail. Released right off. So as we was riding down 3rd Street, the sheriff pulled us over. He asked everyone out who names. Then the lawyer Hank walked up to the car and asked him what was the charges. He said, "Stay out of this before I bust your damn head." And the lawyer said, "Don't threaten me." He said, "If you say it again, I'll bust your damn head." So he said, "Don't threaten me." And the lawyer said, "You're under arrest." He dragged Hank onto the car. Hank was trying to get into the car while the sheriff grabbed his head and slung into the door. There Hank had a busted head and he was bleeding. Darius Newman and Yvonne run into this house, tried to make a call back to Clarksdale up to Jackson. There Hank was taken to jail, and we was threatened if we didn't get out of town in that moment, we was gonna get killed. We left, and I jumped out of the car to tell Darius what had happened to Hank. Dave Bradshaw kept going. He come back to town. Then it was 2 carloads of people left in Marks. Me, Darius, and Lou, and Mike Smith, the driver, went over to the courthouse to see Hank. A Negro man who was in jail, he told us that Hank was over in the city hall across the street. So we left walking across the street, and this big fat white guy was standing outdoors. He hollered, said, "Ain't these niggas cute?" So I looked around. He said, "Especially that one, the tall white one, very cute. Found him a good girlfriend in Marks, I bet." So Mike went over to the window where Hank was, and he started talking to him. This other big white guy said, "If you don't get away from that damn window, I'll throw you in jail." And he said, "You want to go to jail with him?" He said, "No, I don't want to go to jail." He said, "You act like it." He said, "Get off the city property." Hank walked over to the sidewalk and stood up. He said, "You still on the city property?" Hank walked into the road. He said, "You still in the city property?" So he said, "If you don't leave, you all will go up there." So we walked back to the car and drove off. And we come back to Shaw Store and Nelson, and we was deciding what shall we do. Must we leave Hank in jail, or we just wait in Marks till they release Hank? Then we decided that we was gonna wait. So someone, Yvonne McClellan, called to Clarksdale and said that Lafayette Center was coming. Then we waited for Lafayette, but Lafayette never did come. So we went to the Masonic Hall for a meeting. We left Yvonne, Annie Pearl Avery, Leandris Jive at Shaw Store. Mike drove around and told us that the police had released Hank and he was going to escort us out of town. We left walking back from the Masonic Hall, and there we found no one was at Shaw Store. The sheriff had drove out of town, and we was there in the city of Marks by ourselves. And there was a few Negroes was with us to help us leave Marks the back way. Right off, and the sheriff drove back and told us we had only 5 minutes to get out of town. So Doris and Yvonne McClendon was in Shaw home, Mrs. Shaw Holmes, and this young cop, he walked around to the door and he hollered, "Here's 2 more niggas on the telephone." So Doris and Yvonne come out. So we had made a block, and we saw all these white guys at the service station waiting on us to leave the town, Marks. We drove right past them, and we made a left turn coming back to Clarksdale, and we found out there was about 4 or 5 cars on the road, had the road blocked. And there was about 4 or 5 more cars coming down the short way to the intersection. We made a U-turn in the middle of the highway and headed back to Marks. Baseville, I'm sorry. Then we gave a chase about 6 miles, and we got into Panola County, and we feel very safe then. We come to the Negro part of Baseville, and we couldn't find exactly where we were. So we stopped at this house and talked to this man, and he showed us where one of the civil rights workers was working in Baseville. So Lou Sensor and Doris Newman got out of the car and walked over to the house where he was living. Then Doris and Lou come back to the car and told us that we had a place to stay in Baseville. So we walked over to the house, and Lou introduced us to Don. He is a pastor. So we walked into the house. Then we got fed. So it got late over that night about 12:30 or 1 o'clock. And we went to bed. And the next morning we woke up. It was a Negro boy was riding a motorcycle down the street going to school. And they had no muffin on the motorcycle. So it sounded like a machine gun going off. So I jumped up out of the bed, I ran to the window to see what's happening. So I found out that it was just only a motorcycle. So we got up, dressed, and we left, going towards Mrs. Jones' cafe. And we had a flat. So we took the spare out of the back and put it on the car. We went to Mrs. Jones and had breakfast. And then after it was over, we remembered that Hank had a trial that morning in Marks at 10 o'clock. So we left for Marks. We understood that we had if anything had to happen to us, we know what was going to happen. So as Lou told us what we was doing, we went back to Marks. Then I found out that The experience I had was, I never had been through it before. Then we returned to Mars about 5 minutes to 10, and we drove unto the courthouse. There was 2 officers standing outside. So we asked him where was the lawyer trial. He said was at the mayor's office. We drove over to the mayor's office, but the mayor's office was crowded. So me, Lou, and Doris got out of the car, walked towards the door, and where one of the white men stopped us. He said, "You all cannot come inside because the place is crowded." And we walked out of the door. Then Lou called the rest of the kids who was in the car, and we stood in front of the courthouse. So after the trial was over with, Hank come out with this haircut, a big spot out of his head. So he said he was all right, but he still was shook up a little bit from the blow. Then we returned to Shaw's store. Well, there was 7 of us was tired, shook up from the ride we had. So we returned back to Clarksdale, and on the way I fell asleep. And I said to myself, I have never been in a situation like this before, and much violence than I have seen. I have never seen this much. And I think that Marx is a hard egg to crack, but it will be cracked.
Well, it was about 10:30. When a man came up on his wife, and his wife was up in the car with another man. This man was drunk. He would start banging up against his door, his car door. So somebody went to call the police because the man was doing a lot of cursing and so on. And when the police came, the police took out his club and went up there and hit the man in the back with the club. The man turned around and hit this policeman. And the other policeman got out of the car with his club. He swung at the man and missed him, and the man hit him, knocked him down. And the man went back to his car to try to open his car door. And the police ran up on him and snatched him around. And he shot him first he shot him in the left shoulder. Then he shot him in the right shoulder. Then he went on and shot him in the head and killed him. And then at the inquest, they call it justifiable homicide. Because once you done shot a man in the shoulder and both his shoulders, he's helpless. And furthermore, the man was drunk. So there shouldn't have been any shooting at all. And another case was the shooting of a man. He was running from the police. The police you could say they had caught him. And the man was up on a fence. The police went up there and took a pistol and shot him in the back off the fence. When all they had to do was just reach up there and grab him, about 3 of them there. Well, the first time I went to jail was on July the 29th, 1963. The time was about 3:30. We were marching on City Hall for alleged police brutality. We went in jail that evening. They wouldn't feed us. Next morning, when they came, called themselves giving breakfast, they gave some rich, hardest bricks. They gave you one piece of bread. They gave coffee, well, whatever, something they called coffee. And the policeman was doing a lot of cursing. And that Friday, they moved us over to the county jail. And we started getting 3 meals there because in the city we wasn't getting but 2 a day. And so things were acting out pretty good at first. Until one day we were singing our song, and this here deputies and all his jailers start tearing upstairs and doing all this cursing, telling them quit all that singing. So we were singing on, and they took all of us and put us in the sweat box. We were there from about 4 o'clock till about 1:30 that night. And the thing about them, see, it wasn't actually a sweat box because the air conditioning was right below our cell, and the cool air got on the bricks, and then we just laid on the floor. And I saw many victims of police brutality. One was the case of a boy, the policeman, well, a jailer at least, hit him upside the head because the boy wouldn't, well, there was a patch of grass on the side of the road, I think about a mile long. He told 2 boys to do it. And the boys started out, but they didn't finish it. So that evening they came in, the jailer bust him upside the head. They took 2 of the milk boys and held the other one down and beat him. And they was out of circulation for about 2 or 3 days. And that's about all.
Well, Saturday night there was a fight at George Black Cafe. It was between Junior Beasley and another local kid in Clarksdale. The fight was over some beer. The boy threw the beer on Junior Beasley. So after the fight was over, Ben Collins and another policeman come into the place, and he hit Beasley with a nightstick. Then Beasley turned around and hit Ben Collins, the chief of police, in the face. And this other little policeman jumped on his back, and he slung him off his back onto the floor, concrete floor. And he had Ben Collins in the air, picked him up, and he was throwing him around on the table. And he got over Ben Collins and started beating him in the face until this other policeman got up and hit him side the head with a nightstick and knocked him out. Junior fell off of Ben, and they picked him up and drug him to the car, threw him into the car and took him to the city hall. Then some of the boys left running over in Riverton to tell Junior's father what happened. Junior's father went to the city hall that night, and him and Ben had an argument about Junior. So they released Junior on a bond. But what happened in the city hall, no one knows but Junior. But Ben did get a behind whooping Saturday night, chief of police.
But the night or to sleeping on the floor, or to shout our cry of freedom in the hotel or the store. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. You told us once, you told us twice, but if that's freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. No, no, no. Yeah, we tried negotiations and the token picket line. Mr. Charlie didn't see us, and he might as well be blind. When you deal with the men of ice, you can't deal with the ways so nice. But if that's freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. No, no, no. They kidnapped boys in Mississippi. They shot Medgar in the back. Did you say that wasn't proper? Or did you stand out on the track? You were quiet just like mice. Now you say that we're not nice. But if that's freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. No, no, no. It isn't nice to block the doorway. It isn't nice to go to jail. There are nicer ways to do it, but the nice ways always fail. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. You told us once, you told us twice, but thank you, buddy, for your advice. But if that's freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. No, no, no. It isn't nice to block the doorway. It isn't nice to go to jail. There are nicer ways to do it, but the nice ways always fail. It isn't nice, it isn't nice. You told us once, you told us twice, but thank you, buddy, for your advice. But if that's freedom's price, we don't mind. No, 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 we don't mind. No, no, no. You shouldn't have started that quick. How many roars must a man walk down before they call him a man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? And how many times must a cannonball fire before it's forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? And how many times can a man turn people have died. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. Oh Lord, we've worked so hard. We must be free. We must be free. They say that freedom is a constant dying. They say that freedom is a constant dying. They say that freedom is a constant dying. Oh Lord, we've died so long. We must be free. We must be free. They say that freedom is a constant crying. They say that freedom is a constant crying. They say that freedom is a constant crying. Oh Lord, we've cried so long. We must be free. We must be free. They say that